Nancy Davenport-Ennis, the person who had the vision and the passion to found this organization and its sister organization on the same day, almost 20 years ago, the National Patient Advocate Foundation. Her legacy of helping patients over the years is absolutely amazing. None of us would be here today if it weren't for Nancy, and I'd be remiss if I didn't also point out that the service that our co-founder, Jack Ennis, and Beth and Fran, if you could stand up, please. Beth Patterson and Fran Costello. All of whom have dedicated more than 14 years of their life to growing this organization to what it is today. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our founder and chair of the board for both Patient Advocate Foundation and National Patient Advocate Foundation, Nancy Davenport-Ennis.
Thank you so much. Let me say to each and every one of you in this room, there are very special people who have helped us to accomplish what we have accomplished in the last almost 18 years. So I'd like to begin by introducing the members of our Executive Board of Directors and Scientific Committee who are with us this evening. And let me begin, and I would like to ask each of them to stand so that they can be recognized. Dr. Dennis Gastineau. Today he became the immediate past president of the board, but he has served the longest term of any president because I was trying to transition, so Dennis said, I'll stay for 3 years. So please recognize Dr. Dennis Gastineau. I'd like to recognize Jack Ennis, the co-founder of this organization, and the wind beneath my wings, Jack Ennis. I'd also like to recognize Christopher Boone, who has just joined our board of directors today and yesterday. John Caldwell, Brian Garofalo, John Harrington, Diane Mock, Otis Maynard, Andy Miller, and our sustaining treasurer and chairman of the Finance Committee for 17 years, John L. Murphy. I would also like to recognize 2 members of our Scientific Committee who are with us this evening, Dr. Deborah Morosini and Dr. Edith Mitchell. So when Alan came into my office recently, he said, you know, we are going to say a couple of things about you on Saturday night, but there's something that we want you to do. And I said, well, I'll do anything. What do you need to have me do? He said, I just want you to tell the story. Why did you start PAF? Why did you start National Patient Advocate Foundation? So let me tell you our story. It's really not very different than the stories that many of you have in your own lives. For each of us have friends that we hold dear, and we never, ever want to see anything bad happen to any friend that we have. So I'd like to begin by saying that I feel our story is also your story. I need to introduce you to my friend. My friend was Cheryl Grimmel. She was a remarkable young woman. She was very tall, she was blonde, she was 31 years old, she had an 11-year-old son, she had been a wellness trainer in the state of Maine, and she fell in love with a businessman from Hampton Roads who convinced her to relocate so they could build a permanent life together. She was the epitome of health, the perfect picture of wellness. Shortly after relocating to the peninsula, she developed very acute, life-altering headaches. And Billy had taken her to several physicians, and the last one finally said, "You need to take her to see Bernie McAdams, a neurosurgeon here on the peninsula." Following the physician's advice, they went to see Bernie. And Bernie thought it was a simple issue, and he said, "Cheryl, I can tell you we have a problem with the disc in your neck. And I can tell you that we can't correct it without surgery." So Cheryl did exactly what all of us would do, and she agreed to have surgery. When he came out of the surgical suite, the news that he had to deliver was going to change her life forever. For the simple headaches and the problem with the disc was an undiagnosed metastasis from a stage 4 metastatic breast cancer that had been undiagnosed at her very young age. Her doctor here on the peninsula counseled her that it was a time in her life to put her affairs in order, that the journey could be very swift before she would leave her beloved son and the love of her life, Billy Outland. Jack and I had just returned from Duke University Medical Center, where I had had my second mastectomy in 6 months. And he quickly deposited me on the sofa and said, "Let me run to the grocery." And as he's in the grocery, he sees Billy. And he says, "So how are you and Cheryl doing?" And on that very day, Cheryl had been diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. Jack came home shaken. And he said, "I can't believe it, but Billy's fiance has been diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer." For those of you in this audience who have ever had mastectomies or love someone who has, you know that when you come home from surgery, you often come home still with a lot of drains. When Jack told me the news of Cheryl, our advocacy for her was born that very night. I swiftly bundled up and said, "We have to go and see her." We went to their home and we walked in and we had the same conversation that all of you would have. We wiped her tears away, we held her hand, and we said together, there has to be another step. So we will not give up hope. And we tried to counsel her and assure her that we would call our doctors at Duke and see what we could do to get a second opinion. Her journey was what you would want. It was perfect. We got her to Duke the very next week. She was evaluated for a clinical trial, and she was accepted immediately. Life was looking better, and we were optimistic. We came home knowing that the plan was to admit her in 2 weeks. And 4 days before her admission, she received a phone call from her insurer telling her that they would not pay for any of her procedure, that it was going to be experimental and investigational. It was shortly after she received that phone call that she received the second call, informing her that since essentially she would be uninsured, there would have to be a $50,000 deposit paid in order for us to move forward with her entrance into the clinical trial at Duke. Her parents called their bankers in Monmouth, Maine, and they procured an emergency second mortgage on their home in 48 hours and wired the money to Duke. And again, life was good. But when we got to Duke and we walked in for admissions, we then found out that someone had to sign for the financial liability because the insurer was still denying. Jack and I looked at each other and we looked at Billy and we said, we have to do this. I was confident that a good discussion with the insurer and good information from her doctors would reverse the denial. How wrong I was. I could not have been more wrong. And after numerous visits with her insurer, I finally determined that the solution was to go and to simply see the state insurance commissioner, that surely this could be corrected. And when I walked into the state insurance commissioner's meeting, I immediately felt less than an inviting environment. And as I explained Cheryl's case, and I had her policy and I reviewed her information, I said, will you please intervene on behalf of this young woman? She's 31 years old. Will you please help us with this insurer? His response was startling. His indifference was more startling. His counsel to me was very simply, if you don't like the coverage your friend has, then why don't you come to Richmond and get a little bill passed? Now, for many of you in this audience, like Bobby Scott, that's easy. You know exactly how to get a bill passed. You know exactly how to write one. You know exactly who to talk to. But I wasn't Congressman Scott, and I had none of that knowledge. I was an English teacher at Bethel High School. But you know, as an English teacher, I knew how to read, and I knew how to write. And I had friends like Jane Gardner and Barbara Sierra in the media, and I had friends like Dr. Elizabeth Harden at Virginia Oncology Associates. And I had friends like Dr. Roy Beveridge and like Rich Carter, a healthcare attorney in Alexandria, Virginia. And I rallied them together and said, we must change this. Because I've been told if we don't like the coverage that Cheryl has, it's as good as it gets for any woman in the state of Virginia. Together, our task force went to work. That was August. Cheryl was by this point recovering, and she was disease-free. Life was good. We worked diligently and desperately for 6 months to build our case, and with the help of Delegate Mary T. Christian and the help of the late Senator Hunter B. Andrews, they directed every step of our strategy. We went to the House of Representatives and we had hearings, and we were told by chairpersons one after the other, you will not get a favorable vote. And we took every committee. It wasn't the magic of me. It wasn't the magic of any person on our task force. It was Cheryl. It was Cheryl's story. It was Cheryl traveling and sitting in the front line of witnesses with us. Not well enough to testify, but well enough for people to see her and understand there was a real problem. At the end of 88 days, our bill had passed both the House and the Senate, and it was signed into law in the state of Virginia. Unbeknownst to us, reporters from national outlets had been following our story. And within 2 weeks, we were on the front page of most papers throughout the United States. We were in most media outlets telling Cheryl's story and what we had done in Virginia. We started to receive invitations to go to 17 other states. And with each call, the answer was the same. I can only come if you can help me build a task force. For it's the experts in your own community who will make the difference. It's never an outside expert. All politics is local. All legislation is intended to help individuals. As we completed our work in Virginia, Cheryl called us on Thanksgiving week. She was to come over with her parents for Thanksgiving dinner, and she said, "Nancy, I have a terrible headache. I just need to go to Riverside, and I need to get them to give me something for the pain." That was the day before Thanksgiving. Cheryl had been without disease for 3.5 years, rearing her son, loving Billy, and building a life. Within 48 hours, life was not good. We got the diagnosis that Cheryl had brain mets. And on December the 28th of 1994, Cheryl lost her life to stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. As I sat in that room with her, I prayed. And it was a really simple prayer. Show me who will change this. Show me who will stop the suffering. Show me who will make a difference for 300 million people in America, because, Lord, this cannot continue. I had prayed the same prayer every night for 3.5 years. Cheryl's memorial service was on New Year's Eve at 7 o'clock. Jack and I came in from the memorial service, and I looked at him and said, "I know who it is. I've prayed for 3.5 years to find who it would be and to offer my help. And tonight I know it is me. I have to stop teaching. I have to start 2 organizations. I have to be certain that one organization will help the family at the very moment of need, instantly, to begin to take the burden and the despair of financial loss and instability away from these families, and let this patient focus on getting well." And today, that's what Patient Advocate Foundation's mission is. We take care of the business side of the issue. But when we do, we collect data. We give every single patient and their family a voice. And their voice can change legislation, can change regulations through the National Patient Advocate Foundation that impact 300 million Americans, or if it's Medicare, 48 million Americans favorably. The men and women who work at Patient Advocate Foundation have completed remarkable work that is now reflected in federal statute and federal regulations and state laws and state regulations. This journey to build Patient Advocate Foundation and National Patient Advocate Foundation could only happen with 4 compelling assets. For me, this has not been a job. It was never about the business plans. It has always been a call. For me, I believe in God. And for me, when He asked me to serve, I simply stepped aside from all that I thought I would do in my life to do what He needed me to do for Him. I could not have done any of this without Jack Ennis. People look at us and they think I'm the outgoing, strong person, and they could not be more wrong. I'm not, trust me, but Jack is, and Jack is in the wings, and he's saying, we can do this. We can do this. When I went to Beth, who was an executive in the timeshare industry, working in the management side of that in Williamsburg, and said, "Beth, I have such a big request for you. Will you please just take a 1-year sabbatical? Will you just please come and help just for 1 year?" And 14 years later, she has stood up 26 programs at Patient Advocate Foundation. And when I went to Fran, who had just completed her master's and was very happily teaching school, and I said, Fran, could you just take a 1-year sabbatical? We just need 1 year. And 14 years later, she is the president of operations of Patient Advocate Foundation. And the fourth required asset were friends across the entire United States that we had not even met, that we did not know at all. We had to have friends who were willing to believe, as we did, that we could make a difference, that we could help people we did not know, but we knew what their pain was. We could make a difference only if we met these friends. For every single one of you in this ballroom, and every single one of your counterparts who has ever sat in this ballroom over the last 13 years, for every one of you who represent businesses and corporations and pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries and government officials from the city and the state and the federal level. You are our friends who have enabled this journey to result in our service to date of hundreds of thousands of patients. But this journey is not done. As a founder, my job was to try to create 2 foundations that had a culture and a foundation that would allow them to move into perpetuity with the youth and the brilliance and the strategic vision of a man like Dr. Alan Bosch. My mission has been completed as it relates to serving as CEO. It is now your job, Alan, to see that we continue to help countless thousands of people just like Cheryl. It's your job, Alan, to see that all of us will join our hands and our hearts with you to make certain that together we make a difference to people throughout the United States of America, as well as our neighbors next door, our friends at work, and our friends at church. It has been an honor to serve as our CEO for 17 years, and it is a far greater honor to turn these 2 organizations over to Dr. Alan Bosch. Thank you sincerely. Thank you.